Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we'll learn about autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is the immune response of hosts host host immune system to its own self antigen, resulting in structural or functional damage. Autoimmunity was term auto concept of autoimmunity was first introduced by Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich gave term horror autotoxicus. Autoimmunity autoimmunity occur due to breach in tolerance mechanism predisposed to several autoimmune diseases. There are two mechanisms of tolerance: central tolerance and peripheral tolerance. Central tolerance, deletion of self-reactive T and B lymphocyte during their maturation in thymus or bone marrow. In thymus, T cell that express a receptor for such self-antigen is negatively selected, that is deleted by apoptosis. Peripheral T cell pool is devoid of self-reactive cell. In thymus, as T cell that have receptor for self antigen is get apoptosed or deleted. So peripheral pool of T cell get decrease or reduced. In bone marrow, tolerance is developed by receptor editing and negative selection. What happens in some because the central tolerance is not completely perfect, and many self-reactive T and B cell bearing receptor for self antigen escape into the periphery. Hence, for counteracting those lymphocytes, peripheral tolerance takes place. Peripheral tolerance mechanism that occur in peripheral tissue to counteract the self-reactive T cell that escape central tolerance. Various mechanisms comes under peripheral tolerance. Ignorance. Here, self-reactive T cell might never encounter the self-antigen which they recognize. Energy. When the self-reactive T cell interact with the antigen presenting cell, costimulatory signal is blocked. Here B7 molecule of antigen presenting cell bind to CTLA4 molecule on T cell instead of CD28 molecule. Phenotype is giving self-reactive T cell after activation might secrete non-pathogenic cytokine. Hence, self-reactive T cell after activation might secrete non-pathogenic cytokine, hence fail to induce an autoimmune response. Fourth mechanism under the peripheral tolerance is apoptosis. Here self-reactive T cell by activation induced cell death. So in peripheral pool, self-reactive T cell concentration get reduced. Regulatory T cells help in down regulation of self-reactive T cells by regulation of regulatory T cell help in down regulation of self-reactive T cell, sequestration of self antigen, certain self-antigen can evade immune recognition by sequestration in immunologically privileged site. Example: corneal protein, testicular antigen, and antigen from brain. Now we will see about the mechanism of autoimmunity, how autoimmune disease or autoimmunity occur. As we previously said, for autoimmunity to prevent autoimmunity, there is two mechanisms: central tolerance and peripheral tolerance. Whenever there is breach or imbalance or non-functioning of the central tolerance mechanism, then chances of developing autoimmunity is high, or develop autoimmunity. Mechanism of autoimmunity, there are two basic mechanism of developing autoimmunity, or there is two reason to develop autoimmunity. One is due to breakdown of immunological tolerance. Here what happened, immunological tolerance mechanism fail to response of this self-reactive T cell or B cell. First one is breakdown of T cell energy. Expression of co-stimulatory molecule B7 may occur in presence of tissue necrosis and local inflammation, which otherwise not expressed in normal condition. Sometimes during, like in tissue necrosis or inflammation, co-stimulatory molecule of self-reactive T cell become expressive, and this may cause autoimmune disease or autoimmunity. Failure of AICD. Failure of AICD means here self-reactive T cell do not undergo activation induced cell death, so peripheral pool of self-reactive T cell is high, so chances of autoimmunity is also high. Loss of T regulatory cells, which in case of normal condition, it bring down the concentration of self-reactive T cell, so prevent the autoimmunity. But when this loss of T regulatory cells, then chances of autoimmunity is high. Release of sequestered antigen like in injury to the organ lead to the release of sequestered antigen. Example, from cornea or testis, which can mount an immune response. Example, post-vasectomy arthritis and post-traumatic uveitis. Autoimmunity. Second reason of generation of autoimmunity may be after following infection. Here is first cause is molecular mimicry. Organisms share epitope of some of their antigen with self-antigen of host. Antibody which generate for the this causative infectious organism are cross-react with the self-antigen, that's which is seen in example of this type. Molecular mimicry is seen in antibody to streptococcal protein antigen, which can react with cardiac antigen, lead to acute rheumatic fever disease, which is an autoimmune disease. Second mechanism of this autoimmunity generation by following infection is polyclonal lymphocyte activation. Here what happen, antigen non-specifically activate T cell or B cell by certain organism or their product capable of causing polyclonal antibody. Here polyclonal antibodies are synthesized. Polyclonal antibodies are synthesized as seen in polyclonal T cell synthesis activation by super antigens released from microbes. Example, Staphylococcus aureus. And polyclonal B cells activation by product of various microbe. Example, Epstein-Barr virus and hepatitis HIV virus. Third mechanism is of autoimmunity generation following infection is epitope separating. In this condition, cell peptide release due to persistent inflammation induced tissue damage and are presented by antigen presenting cell along with microbial peptide. In this condition, what happens? Antigen presenting cell chances of this as cell peptide and microbial peptide of infectious organism present together to the antigen peptide presenting cell, chances of of recognition of cell peptide as a foreign protein is higher than this microbial peptide. It is possible that there may occur a shift or separate of T cell recognition to cell epitope presented on antigen presenting cell rather than recognition of microbial epitope. Bystander activation. Non-specific activation of bystander cell reactive Th1 cell that lead to cytokine influx and increase infiltration of various non-specific T cell at the infection site. Now, in summary, mechanism of autoimmunity can be of two types, or autoimmunity region of generation of autoimmunity may be two types due to breakdown of immunological tolerance, where breakdown of T cell energy or failure of AICD, loss of T regulatory cells, or release of sequestered antigen is seen. In second cause of generation of autoimmunity is after following infection. Here is the first cause, molecular mimicry. Second cause is polyclonal lymphocyte activation. Third cause is epitope separating, and fourth cause is bystander activation. Now we will see about the example of autoimmune disease. This is the example of single organ or cell type autoimmune disease. First one is these are autoimmune anemias. What happened here in autoimmune anemias? There are three types: autoimmune hemolytic anemia, drug-induced hemolytic anemia, and pernicious anemia. In case of autoimmune hemolytic anemia, self-antigen present on RBC membrane protein. Autoantibodies to RBC antigen trigger complement-mediated lysis or antibody-mediated opsonization of RBC. Drug-induced hemolytic anemia, here self-antigen present on present on RBC membrane. As drug get attached to the RBC surface, it act as self-antigen. Drugs such as penicillin, methyl dopa interact with RBC so that the cell become antigenic. In case of pernicious anemia, intrinsic factor, which is a membrane protein on gastric parietal cell, act as a self-antigen. Antibodies to intrinsic factor block the uptake of vitamin B12, lead to megaloblastic anemia. Idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. Here self-antigen present on platelet membrane protein like glycoprotein second B, third A or first B and ninth. Autoantibodies to these platelet membrane protein lead to destruction of platelet, and feature is thrombocytopenia because platelet count get reduced or decreased. Good posture syndrome. Good posture syndrome. Here self-antigen present on renal and lung basement membrane. Autoantibodies generate against renal and lung basement membrane react with antigen, leading to progressive kidney and lung damage. Myasthenia gravis is the other disease, autoimmune disease, where here self-antigen present on acetylcholine receptor present on motor nerve ending. Antibody found against acetylcholine receptor block acetylcholine receptor, lead to weakening of skeletal muscle. Graves' disease. Here thyroid stimulating hormone act as self-antigen. Anti-TSH antibody stimulate thyroid follicle, leading to hyperthyroid state. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Here thyroid protein and cell act as self-antigen. Autoantibodies and delayed type hypersensitivity T cell targeted against thyroid antigen lead to suppression of thyroid gland. Post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Here self-antigen present on kidney, glomerular and streptococcal antigen antibody complex are deposited in glomerular basement membrane, lead to damage of glomerular or inflammation of glomerular basement membrane. Now we will see about the systemic autoimmune disease. First is a systemic lupus erythematosus, which is called insult is SLE. Antigen is DNA, nuclear protein, RBC and platelet membrane. Most commonly observed in women of 20 to 40 years of age. Immune complexes are deposited in various organs. Fever, butterfly rash, arthritis, pleurisy and kidney dysfunction is the symptom or important feature of this ASLE. Second disease is rheumatoid arthritis. A group of autoantibody against the host IgG antibody are produced called RA factor. It is an IgM antibody directed against the Fc region of IgG antibody. Anti-citrulinated peptide antibodies are also produced. Each woman of 40 to 60 years more affected or commonly affected, autoantibodies bind to circulating IgG, forming IgM-IgG complex that are deposited in joint. Symptom: Main symptoms are arthritis, where most common small joint of hand, feet, and cervical spine are affected. Other minor features seen like in hematological disturbance or cardiovascular feature. Respiratory symptoms are also frequently affected. Respiratory system are also frequently affected in case of rheumatoid arthritis. Sjogren syndrome. Here, ribonucleoprotein antigen SSA and SSB present on salivary gland and lacrimal gland are act as a self-reactive self-antigen. Autoantibodies to the ribonucleoprotein antigen of SSA and SSB lead to immune-mediated destruction of lacrimal and salivary gland, leads in dry eye and dry mouth. It's called xerostomia. Scleroderma or systemic sclerosis. Here, self-antigen present on nuclear antigens such as DNA, topoisomerase, and centromere present in heart, lung, GIT, etc. Helper T cell mainly and autoantibodies mediated excessive fibrosis of the skin throughout the body seen in scleroderma. Seronegative spondyloarthropathies. Sacroiliac joint and other vertebrae. Sacroiliac joint and other vertebrae have this self-antigen present on sacroiliac joint and other vertebrae. Several types of seronegative spondyloarthropathies are ankylosing spondylitis, Reiter syndrome, and reactive arthritis. Common characteristic present as rheumatoid arthritis-like feature, but differ it by association with HLA-B27 means seronegative spondyloarthropathies is more common or associated with HLA-B27 or absence of rheumatic factor in case of seronegative spondyloarthropathies. Multiple sclerosis. Here, self-antigen present on brain white matter. Self-reactive T cell destroy myelin sheath of nerve fiber, leading to numerous neurological dysfunction. Thanks for watching. Subscribe my channel for further upcoming videos.